We're live.
Okay, thank you.
And I will record. Okay, you're good.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June 8th, 2020 work session. A lot to talk about tonight, so we'll get right to it. I'll call the meeting to order and request a roll call, please.
I will record. Hey, oh, sorry. Hold on one second. Okay, you're good.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June 8th, 2020 work session. A lot to talk about tonight, so we'll get right to it. I'll call the meeting to order.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, Mr. Newmoth?
Here.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Vice President Darrow?
Here.
President McClelland?
Here. Now to the meeting agenda for tonight. Mr. Sawyers, any additions or corrections to the agenda?
An addendum agenda, please.
We have an addendum to the agenda.
Correct, for personnel.
Okay, and with that addendum to the agenda, could I have a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Bush with the initial, and then Ms. Kalinowski with the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Newmoth?
Yes.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
President McClelland?
Yes.
And President McClelland, can you hold for 1 minute? I need to make sure the streaming is working.
Okay.
I'm going to do this again. We should be good again.
Okay. Did we, was the streaming started, Ms. Jenkins? Do we need to go back and do anything?
No, it was on.
Okay, great.
We're good.
All right, well, thanks everyone for dealing with little technical issues. We are at our first item of the night, which is discussion items and the 2021 school calendar revisions. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClelland, members of the Board of Education, and for our public at large. This is just a reminder that at the June 22nd, 2020 Board of Education meeting, there will be a hearing in accordance with Ohio Revised Code to modify the school calendar for the 2020-21 school year as previously presented to the Board of Education based upon conversations within the administration, our teaching faculty, and honestly feedback from parents. Given the realities that have occurred throughout the 2019-20 school year, we're proposing to modify the school calendar to eliminate the 4 2-hour delayed starts that occur in October, November, January, and March as currently scheduled in the 2020-21 school year, and replace them with 1 full day professional development day that is tied to winter recess on January 4th, 2021. So this is available for public commentary through the district website. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code, we invite any public feedback desired associated to the proposed calendar change. The official formal hearing that's required under RRC would be presented to the Board of Education at your next meeting on June 22nd. And then we would publish the outcome to our families in preparation for the 2020-21 school year thereafter. Are there any questions I can answer from the Board of Education?
None, sir.
Great.
Nope.
So our next section is really a series of updates, and I want to talk about a few things specifically before I get into the majority of the presentation related to reset and restart for the 2020-21 school year specifically. based upon current events that are obviously happening throughout our nation, but also at the local level, given some current events that have also transpired. So I want to provide a few updates to the board and to our public at large before I get into talking about specifically our work surrounding the 2020-21 school year and what's being labeled by the Ohio Department of Education as reset and restart. So the first place I'd like to go this evening is to really talk about what's going on not only throughout our nation, but the world and really our community at large. And these pictures illustrate really the topic that I want to talk about. Grief, social injustice, and emotions are heightened in our world, our country, and our community, and rightly so. Voices are uniting to express sympathy and outrage for the families of George Floyd and all those that have lost their lives in senseless acts of violence. This past Saturday, over 1,000 people in New Albany joined Xavier Brandon, a New Albany High School graduate, to participate in a peaceful demonstration to allow their voices and actions to be heard to effectuate change. Public education is the cornerstone of equality, without which the pursuit of happiness becomes nearly impossible. Education provides the opportunity to build a better life for yourself. I'm grateful for such every day. Everyone has a right to an education that is in a safe and inclusive environment. Our school district does not and will not tolerate racism or discrimination of any kind in any of our schools. No matter your race, color, gender, sexual orientation, disability, or religion, you are welcome in our halls, our classrooms, and on our school campus. We have a responsibility to provide access to an outstanding education and a safe space for everyone in our community. We must continue to work daily to ensure that such exists for everyone on our school campus. That said, we are not perfect. We are human. We make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes just like we ask our children to do. However, collectively, we have a responsibility as an entire community to stand together for our students and those who have suffered injustice during this time of grief and anger in our nation. We are committed to the work it will take to create a better world for our students, and we must define that work together in the spirit of continuous improvement. It is everyone's responsibility to listen, to learn, and to grow. Without such actions, we are part of the problem. Our school district is committed to being part of the solution. We actively encourage our students to see something, say something, and own their R every single day on our school campus. We teach our students the R factor in hopes of empowering them with the disciplines necessary to produce positive outcomes by owning their responses. Further, we teach our students that we cannot control the events or the E's that will continue to occur, but by owning their R's, their responses, in a positive manner, they can and will directly influence the outcome produced, their O. The recent E's or events in our nation that took the lives of the innocent were clearly beyond our control and unnecessary. Those involved should be held accountable. However, we now have an opportunity to demonstrate to our youth and those that have or continue to suffer social injustice that enough is enough. Now is our opportunity to be united and own our R's that can and will produce positive outcomes for our students, our staff, and our community. While this work must extend beyond our school district and into our community at large to address the social injustice issues at their core, we must also remember that we have a responsibility daily to create a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. We have developed values, behaviors, and outcomes that we're responsible to live and hold each other accountable for daily in our schools. Our values include the need for us to rise up and own it, that we're stronger together, and we must get better every day. Over 5,000 students, 650 staff members, and 10,000 plus parents deserve no less. I've reached out to leaders within our Setting Objectives, Achieving Results African American Parent Network, their acronym more commonly known as SOAR-APN, to begin to ask questions and seek information on a process by which we can and will impact meaningful change within our school district. We will invite other parents, students, and staff and community members to share their wisdom on how to structure opportunities that will permit us to listen, to understand, and to engage in constructive dialogue to improve our schools and ensure that the policies and guidelines enacted by the Board of Education to govern our school district are, in fact, working to protect the safety and welfare of all persons on our school campus every day. In addition to seeking solutions to continuously improve our schools, I and others are committed to engaging with our community officials and our community at large for the betterment of everyone. Such is our responsibility. Clearly, Americans must begin talking candidly together about race starting now. Yet talking about racism is sometimes uncomfortable for many. We avoid such conversations in schools sometimes because it could stir things up that we are unprepared to handle. By approaching each other with good faith and caring, I believe we can ease these fears together. We are stronger together, as our values state. I read this morning, there remains a great deal of apprehension and uncertainty in our country as we move forward in the life amidst a pandemic. However, just as life seemed to be moving in a more positive direction, we were hit again by a virus of another type, one that has plagued our nation for generations: racism. It recently reared its ugly head through the death of George Floyd. The amount of anger, anguish, and unrest many Americans are feeling has reached epidemic levels, and rightfully so. Our young people are watching and learning every day. The question is, what are we teaching them? Tonight, from my perspective, is the beginning of this discussion formally in the New Albany Plain Local School District in a new way. We're not perfect, and we have work to do for our students, our staff, and our community. And I honestly believe that together, being stronger, we can do this work to benefit everyone in the New Albany Plain Local School District at large. Respectfully, I ask the Board of Education, our faculty, our staff, and our students and our parents to join me as we start to figure out what else can we do to continuously improve our school district for all of our students across our entire school campus. President McClellan, I'm going to pause there because I have a couple other topics I'm going to shift to. So I need to know, would you like to have board conversation or commentary specifically on each topic as I address it, or do you want to do everything at the end?
No, I think it'd be good to stop here for a moment. This issue in and of itself is big enough. And I'll open the floor first and let other members, if they wish to say something on this topic, make some comments.
I'll start by saying how much I appreciate your leadership in this area, Michael. And I'm glad that you opened the meeting this way. I'd like to share my thoughts on this topic as well. And I'm very supportive of everything that you just shared and your initiative around this. I want to just share a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And I will only speak for myself in saying that I take the issue of equality for all students very seriously. I believe we must create an environment where every student feels safe and is provided with the same opportunities, rights, equality, and freedoms. I believe it's important to reinforce these values with clear policies and procedures and to hold each other accountable. I also believe we need to teach peace, acceptance, understanding, and love, and that we need this to be a community-wide effort. The only way we can achieve our purpose statement to strive to achieve the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student is if we ensure that every child feels safe and has access to the same opportunities, rights, equalities, and freedoms. I echo your sentiment, Michael, that we aren't always going to get it right, but if we work together, we can always improve and get better. New Albany has always been a community that provides leadership in the areas that it chooses to focus in. And if we decide to focus on this together, we can make meaningful change in our community. So I would echo your sentiments that this be the beginning of a dialogue that helps us truly lead in this area. And I want to just close by sharing another statement I recently read, that it is not enough to not be racist, we must be anti-racist. And I believe this to be true, and I hope that we can lead together in this way. Thank you.
Other members wish to speak?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick and just say a few words. Honestly, Michael, obviously I appreciate your leadership as well. I think everything you stated, I'm absolutely in agreement. Debbie, a lot of what you said, I was planning to say, so I'll just kind of keep mine brief and just share a few words. Without question, what happened to George Floyd and what's happened to others in the Black community for generations is absolutely wrong. It's hateful. It's senseless. I recognize the pain and suffering that these actions and intolerances have caused within the Black community. And, you know, like Debbie said, like, I may not always say the right things and get it right. I can't personally relate. I do empathize and absolutely condemn racial discrimination and injustice it fuels. As a member of the Plain Local Board of Education, it is very important to me that our students feel safe, that they have a voice, that they are supported, and absolutely treated equally. With that said, I remain absolutely steadfast in supporting our district's purpose of creating a culture of accountability that achieves the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. And Michael, thanks for sharing the E+R=O. I do believe that, you know, the lessons and, you know, the behaviors that you, the administration, the teachers are instilling in our students are helping to drive respect, responsibility, and tolerance. And I personally will continue to just listen and learn. I believe that we can continue to improve and get better, and I appreciate the community's support and engagement.
I would just weigh in briefly and acknowledge, Michael, something you said. It can be a challenging topic to talk about and can be uncomfortable. The role of our district is an important one. We're educators. I'm not an educator. We have a tremendous group of educators and a leadership team. And Michael, you mentioned, well, let's define our work together to get better. And I'm not as eloquent as others here, but you know, I look forward to defining our work together and getting better, not only in achieving those best academic and developmental outcomes for each student, but also, you know, in that curriculum, you know, is there something we need to re-examine? I have had a lot of discussions with friends in the past days, friends I've known since I was 5 years old, and current colleagues. And I do believe that we can all do better. And I do believe that there are certain things in our educational system that, as part of the board of being a part of the Board of Education and a leadership team, that we can help effectuate challenges that have faced our society for hundreds of years. And this may be that moment. And it may not be that moment. I hope that it is, but I know that this team working together when we define our work together and set our intentions toward outcomes, that we can make progress as a school community, as a New Albany community. So I am confident that we can be the leaders of change, and that we can work together in a way that is very inclusive and is looking for, building a better community. So I will stop rambling on here, but I know there is work that can be done together to improve the situation, and certainly understand the deep, horrible tragedy of George Floyd, and am as frustrated as everyone about the situation, and look forward to working together to achieve better outcomes, and hopefully making an impact locally. We can find uniquely New Albany solutions. So I'll leave it at that for now, but look forward to the discussions.
I will jump in. I actually just received a message from Mr. Darrow. I think he may have dropped off. I think he's gonna try to get back on. I appreciate that, Michael, your comments and everyone else's comments. Doesn't leave me a whole lot to say, but that's okay. One thing I appreciate is that I think just about every board member mentioned our statement of purpose, and that is to first of all, to create a culture of accountability, which is one of the things we're talking about here, but also to achieve the best academic and developmental outcomes for each student. And we really mean that when we say each student. It doesn't matter what background you are, what gender you are, what religious affiliation you have, each student. And that's what we should strive for every day. I know it's cliche to say, but I do believe that it's our differences that, when all put together, make us special and unique. And is everything perfect? No. Will it ever be? Don't know, but we should be working towards that. And so that doesn't mean we always have to agree, but it does mean that we have to be willing and open to a dialogue and an understanding of each other. We all should be. And so as a board, we're not going to have all the answers. But if you have a thought, if you have an idea about how we can improve the culture in our schools, improve the culture in our community, by all means, the door is open, and we want to hear from you, because we are open for that dialogue and that understanding. But I think there is one thing, and it really should be without saying, that we do all agree on. There is absolutely no place for racism or for bigotry in our schools and in our community. And so we make that clear tonight. And as has been mentioned here, as the district, we do have a leadership position in this community. And it's something that we take seriously. And so we're going to continue to lead with your support and with your help. But I'm also going to challenge everyone watching tonight and challenge everyone in the community, because the real change is going to start right here in your own heart, and in your own home. And we all need to be doing our part to make things better. And so together we are stronger. Together we can do this. And so Michael, again, I appreciate what you've said. I appreciate your leadership on this issue. I appreciate the leadership of our administrators and our community members who have reached out. And we do have an opportunity here. New Albany is not a community that wants to ever be second best. And so here's another chance for us to be the best. And it's time to start working.
Well, John, and other members of the board, and Michael, it looks like I've got audio but no video still. So I'm not usually at a loss for words, but when others have spoken better than me, I am willing to let them do the talking, and each of you have certainly spoken more eloquently than I could, and I appreciate your words and share them.
I want to thank members of the Board of Education for your support. Again, tonight is the beginning. I've reached out to some specific leadership, both internally within the school district for the different organizations, to try to find out different perspectives of what we can do as next steps for meaningful action. So we will put together some form of an action plan for topics of conversation and next steps. And I'm just going to call it next steps. I don't know what all those next steps are, but that's not something we'll make for decision purposes in isolation. So when I get their input and feedback, I will update the Board of Education, and clearly we will continue to talk about this in future board meetings. But I have asked for some additional information from some others directly affiliated to the school district that are active partners every day on what else we should be doing and can do. And then we'll open up that conversation to obviously other parents, other community members, and our students, age appropriate wise, to have those conversations clearly to inform what else we can be doing to provide support on a daily basis to best meet everyone's needs. So stay tuned. Tonight is the beginning of a conversation, and I'm interested in learning what else I can find out from those that I've reached out to specifically to start this conversation to make it meaningful. Hello, Mr. Darrow. We can see you now.
You do.
Okay. The next topic I want to talk about is this debacle of all the frustration and emotion that has been created in our school community related to this article that came out specifically in Wired magazine. So first and foremost, I want to publicly apologize to our parent community that you learned of this conversation in an inappropriate manner based upon a magazine article that does not provide the context of the interview that was provided in advance of tonight's conversation, and then really information that we were going to release about work that we're doing in preparation for the 2020-21 school year to research and evaluate any and all options to try to figure out how to safely bring our kids back to school, depending on what the rules of engagement are that are presented to us from health or state officials related to the start of the new school year. So I'm going to give context, and I responded to about 15 parents directly through email that reached out to me specifically on this misleading title and article. So I'm going to talk about it for background purposes for context. The school district has no formal intent whatsoever to implement technology that's going to surveil students. And I've seen many different descriptions of that through the parent emails I received. So I want to make sure that there's context given to what we were attempting to learn about in order to determine what, if anything, it could offer as a solution for the future, should it be necessary. First and foremost, again, I apologize for how this was released publicly, because it is not the fashion that the district does to communicate with our families. So the article leads people to believe that we are implementing a surveillance tech system for the 2020-21 school year in response to COVID-19 for tracing purposes related specifically for contact, to understand which students congregate or interact with each other for tracing purposes in the event there's an outbreak or resurgence of COVID-19. That is not accurate, and it has been taken completely out of context. So I want to give you the background. Dr. Larry Fruth, who is a parent in our school district, approached the school district probably 2 years ago originally, just to talk about software advancements in development and technology that could actually enhance student safety and security. And that conversation's gone down many pathways over the course of 2 years. But last fall, it went down a pathway of trying to understand, are there ways that technology could be leveraged to specifically help schools from an efficiency standpoint to actually increase student safety and security within a school campus? And Dr. Fruth, being a parent in our school district, is local, asked to meet with me on several occasions and other building administrators to specifically talk about student safety protocols or student security protocols and what that looks like within a school-based environment to inform some work that he was specifically doing from a research perspective related to technology. During that time, Dr. Fruth had shared with the school district that there were sensors being developed by a technology company that would give the ability for a sensor to actually automate daily student attendance within classrooms for classroom teachers. Sensors could be used to specifically understand where students were within the specific school campus. So that's the tracing piece. And since then, I learned a month ago that it's actually been enhanced to try to provide additional features that would also benefit COVID-19. So what started as a safety and security conversation historically has now evolved into a potential response to COVID-19 safeguards should they be necessary in schools. So the pilot that was asked for was for 2 hallways in the middle school building during the summertime to have sensors installed to understand how the software could be used within a school setting. A pilot had occurred in New Jersey, specifically in a school district, but historically this technology has been used, as I understand it, in hospitals and hotels. So Dr. Fruth said they were evolving the technology for potential use within a K-12 environment to try to help schools automate specific functions that occur on a daily basis. We have a lanyard system where students swipe in and out of buildings. So we have secure access to school locations. And because we're an campus that kids change buildings on or go outside for cafeteria purposes at the middle school and high school, or gymnasium purposes or music purposes at the high school or library, our students wear lanyards. That's an ID that they swipe on an ID badge sensor that then unlocks the door. This technology was similar to that in that it was a lanyard-based system where a badge would basically be numerical in nature and assigned to a specific student, as I understand the technology. And then that ultimately would record daily student attendance for a kid when he or she entered a specific classroom or was present for instruction, or it could also be used ultimately to understand where a specific student was, but while only at the school building. The data would be owned by the school district. It would not leave the school district. It is not cloud-based. It's not like your iPhone. It's basically censored-based from the standpoint that it read the name badge or ID badge, because it's a number, an ID badge numerically assigned to a student that then ultimately would go into the software system to let us know that that student was present at school for attendance. It also then recorded that the student was in X classroom at X point in time in the software system. Most recently, it's been expanded to include temperature testing. And there's all kinds of research out there that school districts are looking at. And that was really the intent behind looking at this, was to do our due diligence to understand that if a health requirement would come forward, that the only way school districts were permitted to open was to actually understand a daily student temperature. How would we leverage technology to do that if we wanted all the kids back on the school campus? Because standing at the door with an infrared thermometer and trying to take student temperatures, if that would become a requirement for schools, is not practical and would actually become very impractical for us to be able to open school. So the intent when I looked at this originally for Dr. Fruth, and it's evolved, was for student safety and security and just understanding how to leverage technology to help us keep kids safe and secure on the school campus. This article, unfortunately, twisted it from the basically description that was provided. Dr. Fruth had indicated to us that we would have an opportunity to review it so that we could provide advance notice to our families that this was being published. That did not happen. We did not receive advanced access, and I learned about it after it was already published, which was not what we had intended to do in order to communicate with our families. So for all those things, I am sorry that this has created such significant emotion for some people. It is not my intent, and I've received a variety of different emails to have beacons for students that basically track them outside of the school campus, as some people have inferred from this article. It was meant to be a safety and security conversation for exploration. It was specifically for research. The district has made no commitment to this technology for the 2020-21 school year. We've made no financial investment whatsoever. We were doing this to learn about technology as a potential resource of how it could be leveraged to help us meet specific needs. Again, I don't know at this point in time if those needs will or will not be necessary for the 2020-21 school year, but we were doing our due diligence because that is the expectation I often receive in commentary from parents as to, well, why aren't you researching what might be required to create solutions for every kid to be back on the school campus, if at all possible? So we are anxiously awaiting the official guidance or requirements. And I've heard two different words. I've heard guidance and I've heard requirements related to the safe opening of school for 2020-21. And this was strictly an attempt to help us try to understand that. Again, the pilot that was proposed was for 2 weeks during the summer, sometime in June or July. It has not occurred. There are no students involved. It was specifically for 2 hallways at the middle school, and it was to allow us to gather data to understand what the technology potentially could do to leverage solutions for the future. But again, there's nothing that has been agreed to or being proposed for implementation for 2020-21. If we would even consider it, it would come forward as part of the planning process for our community, our parents, and the board for public conversation, but it was just background research. So I apologize for the article and how it's been construed. That was not our intent. And I apologize that everyone has had to react to it, because as a school district, we try to be very proactive in providing you information or controlling rumors as soon as we know that they're going to transpire. So we have answered on social media. I am answering individual emails. After tonight's board meeting, we will include a public statement for all of our parents to understand the background information related specifically to this. But as the superintendent, I apologize for everything that this has caused, because it was not meant to be a negative experience for parents. We were strictly doing background research to understand what possibly could benefit us in the long term, should it become necessary, which I sincerely hope is not necessary, because this is not something that we would relish doing every single day related to temperature control testing, specifically for students. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions from the Board of Education related to this topic specifically, but I do want to apologize to our community and our parent base that you received the information in an article rather than directly from the school district, because that was not the intent.
Michael, I'll just start, and not to make light of what clearly has become a serious situation with all the concern that's gone around, but this is a perfect example of why you shouldn't believe everything you read. I was just, while you've been talking, I've been looking at what's on the screen here, and a couple things just to point out. I'm not sure that that picture is actually, in fact, a picture of any of our buildings.
It is not.
Never mind the fact that the caption underneath says that the school district plans to equip each of its 4,800 students, which I believe we have more than that too. So just putting that out there, not to make light of it. Obviously, this is something that's concerning to people, but we appreciate the fact that a lot of people reached out to get the information. And again, sorry that it came out in this way.
I was just, Michael, thank you for your leadership through this miscommunication. I, like all of us, was getting pinged left and right through the night and through baseball practice. And it was, again, as John says, not to make light of this, but this is a solvable communication problem. I appreciate that Dr. Fruth sent a note of apology about that article not being able to be reviewed by you. I know how busy you have been in the effort of the leadership team through graduation, through year end, through our association negotiations. And I know that this meeting was just about to begin that conversation about what our options are moving forward. and that we are also, as you have noted, still in a bit of a wait and see mode relative to our guidance that we receive moving forward. So I am just happy in the sense that this is a communication problem. I am sorry that the information flowed out the way that it did, and I hope that all of you who have inquired, please contact your friends. I always feel like for every one person who picks up the phone and texts or calls and expresses concern, there's maybe 10 who don't have time to do that, but they're still concerned about it. And so we want to make sure we get that. It's really hard to get that message as broadcast in clarification as it maybe is in concern the first time through. So I would ask our audience and those who listen later to please promote the clarification, if you will. That said, I know we are going to have a lot of dialogue and discussion and guidance and efforts to try to get our kids back to school in an appropriate manner. So I do appreciate the efforts that you've gone through to try to do our due diligence in advance of some of this guidance so that we are best positioned to make the right decisions for education, for health, and all that we do to take care of our kids here in New Albany. And again, we as you stated, we have not had anything approved relative to this technology. That said, I work for a multinational organization that I've got a badge that I badged into an office anywhere around the world. They know where I am. I go into an office in that building and I badge in, they know where I am. And I'm glad someone knows where I am in that respect. So I'm not promoting or anything. I'm just saying that that's become much more of a way of life for me. And it's just part of everything down to how I get into a space, to where to work, to my wife knowing where I happen to be around the world with my travels with work. So again, appreciate the clarification, and to the audience out there, please continue to reach out with questions. I also have to take advantage of the platform here. I noticed there was some signage that went up around New Albany today. That is tremendous speed. In 24 hours, there was signs up about this, and I'm on a committee called Thanks for Giving. We raise money for the New Albany Food Pantry, for the Mid-Ohio Food Bank, and for Life Care Alliance. We do signage promotion every year. I would love to hear from you. I'd have put you on our committee, and we can do some good out of this. So again, Michael, thank you for your leadership, and apologies to the community. You know us better than that. We communicate. We want to be out in front with you as we do the best for our kids, but understand the concern, and glad that we had a meeting the following day of this article being published so we could get this clarity out.
Are there any other questions or comments I can answer?
Michael, I do have one quick question, and it's on topic but slightly off. You had mentioned in initial discussions with Mr. Fruth about the technology that really was focused more initially on safety and security. As it relates to students, kind of buzzing themselves in and out of buildings, do we currently have, aside from that record of the students, coming in and out of the buildings, based on what I think this technology was originally supposed to be, which was more of a security type system, what do we have that allows us to know where kids are in God forbid, some sort of active situation?
So to your point about the ID badge at the secondary level, students in grades 7 through 12 have a lanyard badge that's assigned specifically to that student. Their photograph is put on it, and they basically swipe in, swipe out in a specific location when they enter a school building. Or if I leave the middle school to go to the high school cafeteria, middle school cafeteria building for lunch, they also have the ability to swipe in when those doors are locked. So it records that the student entered the building. After that, it's through period by period daily attendance. It's done within PowerSchool. So each student has a specific schedule that the teacher then takes the student attendance on a daily basis to record in PowerSchool. So if we are specifically looking for a student, we start with the student's schedule to understand at this time of day, he or she is in X period, which is in such and such room, and that's where we expect the student to be. We verified that through PowerSchool with daily student attendance. And then if necessary, we go find that specific student in that classroom if we're looking for him or her. And if for some reason he or she's not there, then there is a safety protocol in place for a specific process that occurs to actually locate that student in a very quick and expedited manner.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is in response to a few emails, phone calls, or text messages I received specifically from board members related to school facilities. So also it's to provide you an update, but also to our community at large. So despite what you may learn, as we learn at the 2 o'clock press conference when it occurs with Governor DeWine and Director Acton, we don't have advance notice of that information any more than any of you do. So we do not get any advance notice from the state for what's going to be discussed. During the entire time since March 16th, related to COVID-19, there's only been one occurrence where we received 10-minute notification to actually make sure that we were on the press conference to learn something specifically that he was going to discuss about schools. And that came out from the state school organizations. It did not come from the governor's office. So we do not get advance notification of what's going to be said at the press conference. We currently have an Ohio Department of Health school closure order through June 30th, 2020. So although the health orders have been amended for different things, for things opening or reopening in the state of Ohio, the school closure order goes through June 30th, and it has not been amended by Dr. Acton. Although there is an order for closure, there is reopening that is occurring, and the guidance that's been received during the reopening orders is that we have to consult the Franklin County Public Health Department as our local health department because of the school closure order. So based upon those conversations, we have worked with the commissioner at the health department and actually done things in specific stages or phases. So this first one I'm going to talk about, the soft opening, is actually phase 1 for what's been labeled as athletic skills training specifically. So beginning this week, actually started today, students will have the ability to pre-register in groups of 10 or less, so 9 students and 1 coach, to actually be back on the school campus specifically for athletic skills training with required safety protocols enacted. By that, I mean you must wear a mask to and from your destination while on the school campus. You will have to wash your hands. You will have to use hand sanitizer. If you're in the weight room and you touch a weight bar, after you use the weight bar, you have to disinfect the weight bar using specific disinfectant that's been approved by the Franklin County Public Health Department. So there's specific safety protocols that have been enacted in order to allow some reopening to occur specifically for students for athletic training skills. That started today officially on our school campus, and Mr. Wieldonhouse and Ms. Anderson from the middle school are respectively working on that process. Phase 1 only includes high school students, so it does not currently include any middle school athletes. This is strictly grades 9 through 12 in phase 1 to allow us to learn as a school district on what's working, what's not, and how do we improve for the communications to the families about what those protocols are, how students have to arrive to the school campus, where they get dropped off, when they get picked up, the safety protocols that are enacted, et cetera, et cetera. If phase 1 is successful, and each phase is 14 days, in accordance with the information released by the Ohio High School Athletic Association, we would then journey on to the next phase. In phase 2, we would expand to include middle school opportunities, as well as additional opportunities for high school students that have yet to participate. In addition to that, we're working on signage and communications to allow for public use of the tennis courts. That's probably been the #1 question I received from board members is, when are the tennis courts opening? And the second one's the track. So the Franklin County Health Commissioner has publicly approved the use of the tennis courts. We're waiting on confirmation from a vendor that was supposed to resurface the 5 remaining tennis courts now that life is starting to reopen. We're trying to confirm when those tennis courts are going to be resurfaced so that we do not confuse and anger our public by reopening them to shut them right back down. So we are using the student experience this week to learn, to then figure out what additional signage would have to be posted for the public. Part of our conundrum, to be honest, is the current health order that extends through June 30th requires groups of 10 or less. And it also has a requirement from the Franklin County Public Health District that if we reopen the tennis courts, we're responsible for appropriate use by the public because they're our tennis courts. I do not have staff to sit at the tennis courts to watch to confirm that there's 10 or less people congregating in order to fulfill the requirements of the Franklin County Public Health District. So by waiting to learn from our students, we're also hoping that the rules will continue to change to not require us to have a group of 10 or less that would be responsible on the tennis courts themselves. But I also don't want to open the tennis courts tomorrow and find out that the vendors confirmed for next week to do the 5 remaining courts that would then shut them back down. The last piece that was recently announced by the governor is that outdoor playgrounds are allowed to reopen. So we are actively working to create the signage necessary for the outdoor playground usage based upon the guidance received from Franklin County Public Health. The ELC playground will be the only exterior playground that becomes accessible because our intermediate, middle school, primary school playground is under construction. So the main school playground on campus will not be accessible till late summer, just before school would start, because it was part of the playground refurbishment project that we had approved. But the ELC playground will become accessible as soon as we have all the protocols in place to do that. The track and stadium, to answer other questions by Board of Education members or to provide information to our public, has not been approved for reopening by Franklin County Public Health. So I know people want access to the stadium to climb the stairs for physical fitness and exercise purposes, as well as to walk the track specifically. The issue, again, from Franklin County Public Health's perspective, is the congregation of a group greater than 10 and meeting the health requirements in order to safely open it. So those have not been approved yet by Commissioner Mazzola. We have a conference call again. We meet weekly with Franklin County Public Health to get updates on what is permissible. So as soon as those are released, we will then open them to the public as well. Lastly, facility rentals et al. Extend for closure through June 30th. So we do anticipate that pending any other changes to the order that will expire on June 30th, that the rentals for the church, the pool, or other locations on our school campus will become available probably beginning Monday, July 6th. We do not currently know that anything will change to extend the closure. We have not been told that. There's been no signals that the June 30th date will be extended. I believe facilities will be permitted to reopen, and that is what we're planning for the persons that have rented those facilities regularly. So we will start the communication process necessary to make sure they can meet the safety regulations that will likely be required. The track record so far has been the same health standards or safety requirements and protocols that have been imposed on business have been applied to schools for reopening of specific facilities. So that would include social distancing protocols, cleaning procedures, safe distancing et al. Is what we would anticipate that they'll have to agree to in order to gain access to the use of the facility. Are there any questions I can answer about the update on school facilities? We know people want back in, and we're going to provide you access as soon as we are permitted to do so.
Michael, I know I've had a couple of people ask or say that other districts have opened while we have not. Excuse me. Do you have any feedback or any comment to address that question?
So I have asked the health commissioner those specific questions and have provided a few of the examples that you gave to me about the specific school districts that have done such reopening, and I'm waiting on a response. I did share with you the last response I did receive specifically from him that clearly indicated that they did not have permission to do so, and if they did so, they did it without the permission of the health department.
I mean, I certainly don't want to be the one to tattle. So it's, but the commissioner's responses were very clear. It was either a 3-letter answer for the tennis courts, or it was a series of 2-letter answers for everything else.
I agree. And the no was in capital. So it was emphasized that the answer was no. The bigger issue for us, if we go against the health order, I think is a liability issue that we potentially, if there is an issue on the school campus and it was for our negligence of opening the facility without permission based upon the current health order, we could be held liable, and none of us want that. So we are trying to be responsive, but we need to do so in the manner by which the rules have to be followed. So I know people want access, and we will provide it as soon as possible.
Hey, Michael, just a quick question. So for phase 1 with our high school student message, we're coming back in groups of 10, right? Or 9 plus a coach.
9 plus the coach.
Will they be in the track or on the stadium?
Yes, they're permitted to use it, which is part of the irony that I know is going to create some issues, to be honest, but they do have permission to use that facility for skills training because it's supervised. It's a group of 10 or less. That same group of students will be training together. That was one of the requirements in phase 1. So if Mike Bush signs up with 8 other friends, your group of 9 plus the coach is your group of 9. Your group of 9 that you're participating with cannot change during phase 1. So once you're exposed to that group, you are part of that group for 14 days. Then those rules change in phase 2 to go to a group of 50 if we're successful. So we just have to, we're following the guidance. And have provided all that information to parents and students and their families through the coaches in the athletic department to ensure that we can be successful, because we want the rules to be as relaxed as possible, as quickly as possible, but in the safe manner that's necessary to protect the safety and welfare of all involved.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that detail. I think that's just helpful for the rest of the community too. So if they're driving by the stadium and they see people in there, know that it's our athletes and they're under a certain protocol of what they're doing, and it doesn't mean that the stadium's open.
Great point. Thank you. Okay, the next part that I want to talk about is really focusing on 2020, 2021 and our preparedness, just to try to start conversations. And again, all of this information remains subject to change based upon state and local health officials. So we receive ongoing information that's ever changing. So I'm going to tell you that it changes hour by hour or minute by minute based upon the day of the week and what's going on, specifically related to COVID-19 for preparedness purposes. But I'm going to tell you what we know as of today, and I guarantee you it will be somewhat different by tonight or tomorrow, just because that has been our constant experience in planning for the great unknown. But everything focuses on back to our statement of purpose, and the work that you're going to hear about as I walk you through this really focuses on ultimately creating that culture of accountability that permits us to achieve the academic developmental outcomes that we expect for each student. So I know that after I go through this presentation this evening, it's going to create more questions that people will want answers to that I don't have answers to because we have not been given that information. So I will explain that as we go through it. Everything that we're trying to do in preparing options related to 2020-21 goes back to really our learning target for our school district on the why, the how, and the what, and specifically trying to build systems and options that guarantee student achievement, student growth, and student well-being, specifically for our students and their daily experience, regardless of what framework or model that's going to exist within. So that is our grounding for the work that we're actually doing. So this graphic has been published by the Center for Disease Control, and it was basically meant to become the graphic organizer to help school districts start answering specific questions as to whether or not you'll be able to open at a 10,000-foot view. So it's very high level, and it's being used by the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio Department of Education to determine what guidelines or requirements will be forthcoming from the state. We have seen drafts of those guidelines and or recommendations and or requirements. So I'm going to tell you the first version that I had read had requirements all over it. The second version had requirements with recommendations. The third version was recommendations and guidance. So it is evolving based upon the constant change related to the data associated to learning from COVID-19. And we will use that information to try to help create models and options that I'm about to explain to you. In addition to what's forthcoming from the CDC, ODH for the Ohio Department of Health or the Ohio Department of Education, we're also looking at other research and resources specifically. So the one on the left, the considerations for reopening school, was actually commissioned by the Central Ohio Superintendents Association, for which I belong, obviously, and lead for the 2019-20, 21 school year. And we actually worked with the Educational Service Center to try to help them help us as school districts throughout Franklin County and others, specifically to talk about what are those things that we need to think through in a very detailed question-like manner associated to reopening 2021. In addition to that, we actually actively participate within Hanover Research. So this is just a document I pulled for illustration that Hanover is specifically doing work across the United States to try to help school districts successfully open for 2020-21. And theirs is like a checklist that goes through different departments specifically. But again, resources to illustrate, we're trying to look at best practices across the United States, and in a few minutes you will see across the world, to understand specifically how people have been successful in bringing their kids back to the school campus in a very safe and secure manner, regardless of COVID-19. So this graphic is from the EAB, and it's a K through 12 organization research facility that specifically specializes in doing work related to education institutions. And this slide tries to describe 3 assumptions for how the virus might remain with us for many months to come. And we've used this with faculty and staff to try to help inform our planning protocols, specifically as we look towards the future. But regardless of what happens with treatments and works towards any vaccine that may or may not be available by December, the healthcare officials, as illustrated on this graphic, absolutely believe that one of the 3 scenarios will likely happen. We will continue to make progress and contain the spread related to COVID-19. We will loosen the restrictions to the point that there is a late fall resurgence of some type related to COVID-19, or we loosen the restrictions so much and the spikes are so great in specific cases that we'll be forced to go back to a stay-at-home order, which I know none of us want. So I put this in the context for the leadership team and really our staff during our professional development days at the end of May, in a system that I honestly stole from Worthington. So one of the things we are great as educators is learning from others and then using their ideas to put within our own environment. So Worthington, in a conversation, had started the traffic light, much like we use for behavior systems at the elementary level. But using the traffic light as ultimately that system by which we can explain what happens with COVID-19. So if we're COVID red, we're in remote learning and we're at stay at home, it's worst case. COVID yellow, we're in social distancing and we have some limits to student attendance, and it might force some type of a daily attendance rotation of some format if we're not permitted to have all students on the school campus, which I'll explain in detail. And then green is good in that all of our students will be back on our school campus because COVID-19 is under control, and we just practice good hygiene practices every single day with specific safety protocols that we can enact and still have everybody back on our school campus. So let's talk for a few minutes about COVID red. This is similar to what parents experienced from March 16th till the end of the school year. But as we would look towards next year, there's some specific changes that we would expect to occur if we end up back in a remote learning situation based upon the learning that took place from our experiences this past spring. So the parameters you're going to see will replicate on each of the 3 systems. So in this case, our expectation would still be that if we are in a remote learning environment, new learning is still required to be conducted. Traditional letter grades would be implemented at the intermediate school, middle school, and high school, and report cards would continue at the ELC and primary school. We would also have an expectation that as much pre-K through 12 alignment for consistency for parents as possible would occur related to Schoology, the guaranteed and viable curriculum, and the developmentally appropriate expectations and workload that would be assigned by teachers across the entire spectrum. And then lastly, we would give maximum consideration for our families while also adhering to the employment contractual requirements that we have as a school district with our bargaining units. During our planning for RED, all teachers and our expectation must now engage students in live and recorded instruction weekly using district approved virtual conference and learning management system tools. So those would include Schoology Conference, Google Meets, or we have new licensure forthcoming to the school district for Microsoft Teams. So that could also be added as an additional feature. But should remote learning be required to be continued in the fall at any point in time, it may not be in August, it could be by Thanksgiving, we would then increase our expectations for what we actually did during this past spring into the fall and actually have students participate in live and recorded instruction weekly with our classroom teachers. And our focus for the summer, and you'll hear me talk about this in a few minutes, is really creating the blended learning curriculum that's necessary for that to be successful and providing professional development opportunities for our faculty and staff to also be successful within that environment. Each building administrator in this new RED in the fall, if it would be required, will create a schedule for when teachers will be providing synchronous instruction, again, to provide consistency and convenience for families so there aren't conflicts that are created for how that schedule would actually exist. And then, of course, office hours as defined by each principal would still be continued to be required weekly with our teaching faculty to ensure that they have the ability to pull up to small groups and provide individual support to students as new expectations should worst case RED be required at some point during the 2020-21 school year. COVID yellow requires social distancing and limited attendance. So the parameters at the top, so the first three are different, and you're going to see as we go through the models what changes. So in COVID yellow, our school buildings become available for students every day, Monday through Friday, but there's a rotation of some type that is going to likely be required because of health and safety standards related to social distancing. Our teachers would be prepared to present every day on campus, to be here every day on our campus pending the rotation or the specific health requirements, so that our students, for the days that actually they would be allowed to be on campus and whatever rotation model gets created, and I'll show you a couple examples in a few minutes, our teaching faculty would be here to welcome those students, and when they're not physically at school, they would be participating in remote learning from home. This model can also provide access for students with special needs in accordance with their IEP. If necessary, they could be permitted to be on the school campus every single day. And then expectations for 4 through 7 for parameters at the top stay the same as the RED model. However, because of the social distancing and limited attendance requirements that could be enacted, there's specific requirements that we have to take in place as we're building these models, which we're doing right now. For health and safety purposes, we have to focus on high-risk populations, ensure proper social distancing protocols that are within the building capacity limits that could be enacted for safety purposes. There will be conversations related to face masks and or facial coverings of some type and whether or not they will or will not be required. Health assessments for what would be required before a student comes to school, good hygiene practices of how we wash our hands, in some cases hourly at school, and some examples I've seen from other parts of the world. Specific signage that we would include within the buildings to reinforce specific safety protocols beyond what was established right now that we had prepped for summer, but we'll add more for fall. And cleaning and sanitization efforts, the specific training for PPE for staff members, and specific training that would be required by the health department for how to recognize specific symptoms within a classroom if a student was presenting COVID-19 symptoms, specific restrictions to visitors, the diagnosis process, a quarantine process, if a student is suspected to be ill or a staff member is suspected to be ill, and what those protocols are specifically from the Department of Health as we have seen them, and then how to allow a student to return to school after he or she is no longer ill, and the same for a staff member. There's educational considerations that we specifically have to address for equity. Assessment of student education levels, and specifically if they're successful in a remote-based environment versus a face-to-face environment, because clearly the kids are going to have by and large the greatest impact with face-to-face instruction versus just online. The teacher professional learning that we're currently working on throughout the summer, the essential curriculum standards that would have to be identified for specific implementation, flexibility that would be required within the culture and the environment of the school district for differentiation and personalized learning, student attendance requirements in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, and what happens in relationship to truancy online versus truancy in person, college credit plus, and more. The social emotional needs of kids, specifically looking at student and staff supports and family engagement, and what else we need to do to lift up and support kids when they're not physically on the school campus. And then operational logistics that I'll talk to in detail on a couple of these related to transportation, custodial maintenance, and how we clean our buildings, both during the student day when kids are present, and the specific protocols that we anticipate that will be in place from the Department of Health. How our secretarial staff will interact with the public and restrict visitation to the school building, because visitors will be strictly prohibited in many cases based upon current guidance that we've seen. Food service and cafeteria service, and whether or not it can or can't exist. There will be no large group cafeteria, so we will have to determine how to do cafeteria services differently in a yellow model. No field trips, curricular and co-curricular extracurricular activities may be restricted. Don't know what that's going to be until we basically discover this. And then the use of internet and technology accessibility for 2020-21. The good news is, based upon our implementation of the technology plan, we anticipate that all students in the school district will have access to a district-owned device based upon our current trajectory of how we're looking at enrollment. Our juniors and seniors at the high school would be issued Chromebooks based upon availability of technology. Our first graders would be issued iPads, and then our kindergarten and preschool children would also get access to existing iPads that would be removed from carts to be used specifically in their grade levels. So the technology accessibility issue for a device will be accounted for based upon current enrollment projections, and we will continue to work with families specifically on internet and accessibility at home should it become necessary. I'm going to go deeper into yellow in just a minute, but I just want to briefly mention green is good, and this is the perfect world, that all school facilities and services are fully operational. Our teachers and our employees are present on the school campus every day with our students. We have new learning expectations, the traditional letter grade system, alignment for curriculum and expectations, and maximum consideration for families. The difference in green is it would also incorporate a blended learning environment as part of the daily instructional environment at school, so that it could become a turnkey solution for students, that if you were not permitted on X day, we end up back in a red situation and you immediately stop coming to school, you would know how to be successful when you went home immediately within a blended based environment. So that's part of the structure that we're building this summer to support our students and for what that would look like. So as I've indicated in the requirements below for planning, we would implement and practice the blended learning environment daily within our classroom practices across the school campus. So they would be incorporated by teachers on a weekly basis in the event we would be told at any point in time, you're no longer permitted to come to school. We would keep information update in Schoology and PowerSchool in case we have a quick change in the learning environment that would be required. And again, we would go through all the health and safety standards that we would anticipate that would be required for us to have all kids back on the school campus specifically. I mentioned that we talked as a school district about online learning outcomes and different expectations that would exist for kids if we end up in any blended based environment where remote instruction's also required at home. We would still demand that we have authentic connections with kids on a daily basis, if at all possible. We would support social emotional interaction and supports for our kids. We would talk about student and staff well-being. We would implement the specific consistency protocols I talked about related to Schoology Conference, the learning management system, and the use of those tools specifically across our school district to make sure that it is successful for our students and our families. We would talk about the quality over the quantity of looking at example curriculum standards and the workload that would be required specifically of students, but we would have increased expectations from where we were this past time through March till the end of the school year. We would emphasize core academic skill development based upon information currently provided by the Ohio Department of Education. That can change, but that's currently what the department has produced. We would have balanced, engaged, and meaningful learning experiences for kids, all within a synchronous and asynchronous environment. That would include group opportunities for students for socialization and social emotional support and activity, intervention, enrichment, and teacher feedback. So we have increased expectations related to a remote-based learning environment should it become necessary at any point during the 2020-21 school year. And we're using this as the guidance for what we're actually doing for summer work. So again, back to the research. EAB basically has produced information to support school district, and one of them is about investments that we specifically as a district can make that are likely to have the most impact for our students. So this graphic illustrates that we have to focus on improving our collective capability to proactively identify individual student needs, improve our use of differentiation and support services in both in-person and virtual sessions for our students, and simplifying our processes and procedures for families. It's to provide a seamless and student family experience. This needs to occur regardless of the model or scenario that we find ourselves in. This absolutely aligns to the feedback we received from our parents during the parent survey during remote learning efforts this past spring. We will continue to engage our parents in opportunities to provide input and feedback through our PTOs. Who have agreed to host focus groups in June for us to kind of go back and review the changes that we did make during COVID-19 1.0 and the remote learning experiences at the end of the 2019-20 school year to help us understand from their input what we need to know, what worked well, and how we can ultimately improve upon that experience yet for the 2020-21 school year should it be necessary. Additionally, we're actively preparing a new parent survey regarding the return to school in August. We need information to understand where our parents currently are and their thought process regarding sending their children back to school and under what circumstances, if any. So we need to know specifically if parents intend to keep their children at home, regardless of what's happening with COVID-19, because I've received those emails. I'm sending my kid to school if you tell me I can send my kid to school regardless, or I'm willing to send my kid to school, but I need to understand what those specific safety protocols are that might be required for me specifically as a parent. So we are working on a parent survey to send that out to help us gain that information specifically from our families so that we can successfully inform options for how we prepare for 2021 to align with the recommendations, requirements, or guidelines that are received from the Ohio Department of Health, the Governor's Office, and or the Ohio Department of Education. To date, we're working on supporting teachers, administrators, and staff in preparing for these new options or this new environment that will include blended learning. We conducted 3 PD days at the end of the school year for all teachers and several non-teaching positions in our school district that work directly with students to have an establish consistent understanding of expectations for what 2020-21 will require should we be required to enact remote learning. We're offering additional professional development sessions this summer based upon teacher and administrator feedback to specifically help them thrive within a blended learning environment. We're providing every teacher in our school district with up to 30 hours of paid curriculum work by teacher teams, by department, or by grade level to specifically talk about the planning and work that's required to enable our students and teachers to be successful in a blended learning environment or a hybrid of a blending learning environment, should that become necessary. We're establishing a collaborative reset and restart team specifically to talk about curriculum questions, logistics, and more within our school district. And then, of course, as always, we will continue to partnership with our local physicians, the practitioners, the epidemiologists, the researchers, experts, and officials. They're all parents in our school district that are actively participating in the New Albany COVID-19 task force to help us define what that successful restart plan will be based upon whatever guidance we receive, but to do that in collaboration with our staff, our PTOs, and our community once those are published. So we anticipate expanding that to form some type of a reset and restart collaboration team that will involve multiple stakeholders once we learn what the rules of engagement are from the state that I'm going to talk briefly about now. We all know that Governor DeWine has publicly stated is the intent to reopen schools in the fall, for which we are extremely grateful. We just don't know what that means yet. He has added details that the local boards of education throughout the state of Ohio, because of local control, will establish the start date of the new school year. They're working on broad outlines of health requirements. I will tell you, as of this morning, the word requirements I saw in a different document said guidelines. So I don't know if it's going to be requirements. I don't know if it's going to be guidelines. I don't know if it's going to be recommendations. So that verbiage continues to change. Because there's such diversity amongst the 611 public school districts across the state, we do anticipate there's some local control decisions that will be permissible that'll come back to the Board of Education and the administration to specifically do in cooperation with our local health department, Franklin County Public Health, to create those plans at a local level of some type. But we have been told, and I've alluded to this multiple times, that at any point in time, we must be prepared for a turnkey solution to stop school on Friday and start school remotely on Monday, should it become necessary. So that has been in every document that I have read or every webinar that we have attended, literally for the last probably 4 weeks consistently. Potential daily precautions. These are pending state information, but there could be a requirement for a daily health assessment that's conducted by a family before a student actually returns to school. The physical and social distancing requirements, will face masks be required or not? Good hygiene practices that we would implement across the school district, and then cleaning and sanitization. So for the daily health assessment to date, it's to confirm that a person does not have a temperature that exceeds 100.4 without medication for a period of 72 hours. And then specifically respiratory related issues for shortness of breath or persistently dry cough, or the new version from the CDC also includes 2 symptoms of chills, repeated shaking with chills, muscle pain, headache, sore throat, or loss of taste or smell. That you have not been in contact or exposed to anyone with who is symptomatic of COVID-19, and you have not been in contact with a person confirmed with influenza A or influenza B or presenting flu-like symptoms. So the expectation would be that families, if students are permitted to return to school in the fall, could be required. I don't know that this is yet. I'm just telling you it's in some documents that we've seen, that you could be required to confirm this in your household. And then during the student day, we could become responsible for verifying that a student does not have specific symptoms to present that he or she has a fever, and what we would specifically do for safety protocols within a building should that happen. The physical and social distancing is still the 6 feet requirement specifically. This dramatically changes, and this is my yellow example. If we are required to physically social distance kids at school and keep them 6 feet apart in a classroom, we will not have 24 students in a classroom. It is physically not possible. If this is a requirement that comes from the state in any way, shape, or form, we immediately go to yellow. So we would have to implement specific provisions of safety protocols in a classroom to maintain physical distance. What does that look like? So in looking at square footage, I'm just going to tell you the rule of thumb is 50%. So a classroom of 24 will become a classroom of 12 based upon current square footage that's available across our school buildings. We're a little tight, and we're working on solutions at the primary school and a few rooms at the early learning center. But dominantly, just for public perspective of understanding, if we're required to have limited student participation for daily attendance, and it would require us to social distance 6 feet apart, we would go to 50% capacity max. We would put 12 students, no more than 12 students in any classroom on our school campus. That would be in compliance with the health requirements or guidelines if they specifically come out. Those guidelines or requirements or restrictions could also permit the use of non-classroom space for instructional purposes. So because of social distancing requirements in yellow, you will not be permitted, as an example, to have a student group of 28 in a physical education or wellness course. That could not happen. So one of the examples that's actually been published is you convert those spaces into academic classrooms in order to provide additional access to students. And because you would be restricted on what you were permitted to do with those students, specifically in a gymnasium as an example. Again, don't know if all of that is going to happen or not. We've just been told to evaluate any and all options for the use of your physical space in your school buildings. And again, we're a school campus, so our rules are a little bit more complicated because I don't have neighborhood schools that put kids into lower concentration amounts. We have schools of 1,200 to 1,600 on the school campus that dramatically impact how we could actually do social distancing. If yellow is also required, we would talk about new models of course and student scheduling. Specifically, this is where it gets into looking at split schedules, alternating days of daily student attendance, how we transition kids in school buildings, because one of the requirements, because of the 6 feet social distancing, will be to minimize student movement, specifically between classrooms or common spaces. We will be required in yellow to reduce the number of students in classrooms, the hallways, the cafeteria, if it's even allowed to be used, and how we do this thing called school transportation, specifically because of the health protocols, if they are required. So we pulled research based upon other models that are going on throughout the world. Again, this is from EAB. They're the unscientific findings of the research that's been done so far, from Denmark to Israel to Maryland to DC to Australia to Austria, and then current considerations underway in California and Oklahoma. And you can see different models that they brought back different students at different times, and what that specifically does in health and safety standards, the specific impact for childcare potentially and its benefit to a home, what it means for learning equity purposes, and then cost and complexity for the additional safety measures that are required to be put in place specifically for students to be back on the school campus. So the one that has the greatest amount of research and success so far is an A-B day model specifically that's being used in Australia and Austria. And you can see the grading system assigned to it, and the commentary and the research basically truncates to it's the right balance of consistency for families, it provides equity, and it has minimal cost specifically for implementation. And I'll give you an example. So like in an A-B model, and it's not necessarily every other day, and it's not perhaps on a weekly basis, one of the things that we anticipate that the parent survey will tell us is that if we are required to be in a yellow model, and kids can only be at school on certain days of the week, we anticipate our parents will tell us from their perspective, I need consistency because I also might have to do this thing called go to work. So we anticipate parents might say, if my child's allowed to come to school 2 days a week, I need those 2 days a week to always be the same 2 days, and build my kid's schedule based upon that so I have consistency within my home. As an example, so a student could come to school on Monday and Tuesday, then they're in remote learning for other days of the week. A student could be in remote learning Monday and Tuesday, be present on the school campus Wednesday, Thursday, and then back in remote learning on Friday. So we are currently building models to try to figure out what is the way that we can maximize access to student learning in a hybrid model, yellow, that would require a student to be part-time remote learning and part-time in-district learning face-to-face. That's the work we're currently doing within the leadership team across the school district to talk specifically about the student day. And what will arrival and dismissal of students look like? Is there a staggered start? Are kids on the same schedule or not the same schedule? Is it a different schedule by building because of transportation? School transportation in yellow will be dramatically impacted. I'm going to tell you and we're meeting again on this tomorrow, but in the event we actually go to a hybrid model, we will not be able to transport all of the students we currently transport to and from school. we will likely go to state minimums. So as much as I hate to say that, it's the only way I can create solutions to get required students, pending changes in state statute, to and from school. That would mean the loss of potentially transportation for students in grades 9 through 12, and potentially the loss of transportation for students in grades K through 8 that live within 2 miles of the bus loop. Bus depot at the intermediate school specifically. And I know none of us want to do that, but if yellow is required, it will mean that we have to do business differently called school. Visitors and volunteers will be significantly restricted to the school campus. We will have to create professional development and specific safety protocols related to illness, how to access the nurse's office, and the specific wellness activities that take place at school. Lunch and recess will likely be done differently. I was happy, and I'm just going to be honest and say this out loud, I was happy to see that outdoor playgrounds were opening, because in every document I've seen to date, outdoor playgrounds are closed for school purposes. I'm hoping that does not become the case come fall. Restroom procedures have to change because of social distancing requirements. Our school culture and activities, specifically that's to reference how we do co-curricular and extracurricular activities related to band, choir, orchestra, concerts, performances, plays, and drama. All of that is likely to look very different if we are also in yellow. And our before and after school programs could be limited or restricted based upon specific social distancing requirements. The biggest one that would be impacted would be Eagle's Nest, which our parents rely on for work purposes, that we would have to figure out based upon what those health and safety standards could be. So very quickly, I'm just going to account for the things that we've seen. I do not know if facial masks or coverings will be required, so we're just saying it's may. There are specific persons that are excluded from that requirement if it does exist. For practical purposes or a physical, medical, or behavioral health concern. Good hygiene practices really go back to everything we've been promoting from the get-go of washing your hands for at least 20 seconds regularly at school, covering your cough or sneeze if you're not required to wear a face mask, using hand sanitizer if a wash station's not available, but the first choice will always be soap and water, and then helping our students understand that they're not supposed to touch their eyes, their nose, or their mouth. Because of the potential of spreading COVID-19. And then lastly, our cleaning and disinfecting protocols will change within our school district. Current guidance we've seen so far is that we will have to do cleaning and disinfecting between cohorts of students. So if a cohort of students is in classroom X and for some reason they leave that classroom, we have to disinfect the classroom upon their departure so that when they return, it has been disinfected for their acceptance to return and current recommendations we've seen. Same thing goes in place for cafeterias, are probably going to look very different, and what specifically can happen specifically for their use for lunch. If we're permissible to be here in a green situation, we still anticipate there will be some restrictions. Bottom line is our goal is to create safe environments both for students and staff. We want everyone to be safe. We absolutely want students and staff to be able to return in August. We're creating every plan known to man to illustrate safety protocols. In the event the state of Ohio dictates that we have to present a plan to Franklin County Public Health in order to be reopened, we would do that again in cooperation with the COVID-19 task force that includes all of those health professionals and others, as well as our parent organizations across our school district, administrators and faculty and staff, so that we collaboratively can come up with solutions to present, hopefully to be approved. We will be required to look at other things in that safety plan related to supplies. Students would not be permitted to use supplies. They would become self-contained specifically to that student. There would be no shared usage whatsoever. We have to consider state funding restrictions and some of the specific equipment that we would be required to have. Most recently, our conversation has been about an electrostatic sprayer to disinfect a large group area in a very quick manner in the event it actually is emptied by a group of students, and there's another student group that would be received to use that space, how we could actually disinfect that space very quickly using electrostatic sprayers as a potential solution. Fortunately for us, the New Albany Community Foundation and Craig Moore and the board did reach out to me to ask how they could partner with the school district to support anything that we anticipate we might need for COVID-19 related expenses to reopen school. So we're very grateful for the partnership. They've started a new campaign for $25,000 for $25,000. So they have a $25,000 matching donor that has sponsored the ability to provide resources to the school district to pay for anything related to COVID-19 specific expenses related to PPE, cleaning products, cleaning equipment, or to provide life safety related resources specifically for students that include food through the New Albany Food Pantry, as well as social emotional support for mental health counseling and more. And then lastly is understanding the impact of the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, and specifically what that means for our teaching faculty and non-teaching staff and administrative staff across our school district, and what we have to do to be compliant. Transportation, I've talked a little bit about. These graphics have changed, but I left them in because they came from EAB. One of the things that we're seriously talking about is our bus drivers and our fleet within our school district, and what will be available for the number of buses and how many times we can run routes on a daily basis, both in the morning or in the afternoon, depending on when school would start or stop for specific grade levels, and how many routes we can run approximately every 45 to 60 minutes to allow for the safety protocols that are likely to be required in the event we're able to use transportation. There's conflicting reports related to what social distancing on a bus is going to look like. The original graphic that's illustrated was every other seat. That was the first piece of research that came out that said we likely would have no more than 13 to 15 students permitted to ride a bus. Every other seat would be required to be vacant because of social distancing. The most recent reports we have seen illustrate that we might be able to have one student per seat if they sit next to the window, because it would create the physical distancing necessary on the bus, and the high back seats are actually being accounted for as a potential safety measure, much like the sneeze guard or the plexiglass things that you're seeing at different businesses. But students likely would be required, if they're riding a bus, to have a face mask in the current literature we're reading. The other thing that's changed within the last week is that siblings would be permitted to be in the same seat in the same row. That is different because they're coming from the same household. Current information we're reading might suggest that that might also be possible. The challenge with that becomes, number one, eligibility based upon grade level for the number of students we're able to transport safely to school based upon the size of the fleet and the number of the drivers. And then number two, the fact that an elementary student may not be on the same schedule, just like they are today, with a high school or middle school student. So there could be different student schedules that would then impact the ability for siblings to be in the same row on a bus based upon when they come to school or go home from school. Lastly, and I talked about this as a coming attraction, is the parent survey. So we are working on a parent, guardian, and staff survey. We need additional information. I'm going to use the example specifically here for parents because we have yet to develop the staff survey. We just haven't done it yet. It's on our list. But we need some parent information to understand that if there are specific health and safety protocols in place, what do you think you're going to do within your home today? Your kid is going to attend school full-time only if it's offered. You would attend school full-time remotely if it was available. There is current legislation being introduced to permit a parent to choose to allow their child to stay home for remote instruction potentially. That currently only extends through June 30th. If the legislation would go through the General Assembly, that could become an option that parents could choose. That's why we say it presumes legislation. Currently, that is not permissible beyond June 30th. It would have to be permissible by state statute to offer that to families if they would so choose. Attend school for any full-time or part-time hybrid option if it's present, and your student would be remote learning when they're not physically at school. And then not attending school, period. I'm withdrawing my child to home education or an other educational setting. And we're including that because I've actually had some inquiries from families that are not comfortable with their student based upon specific family circumstances to return to school until there's a different solution for COVID-19 in the world. So they're asking, pending state legislation changes, what are my other options? We clearly understand that all of those will be impacted by the availability of childcare, availability of transportation, what the alternate schedules will become, et cetera, et cetera. This is an iterative process. We're not going to have all of these answers until the state of Ohio releases the requirements, the recommendations, or the guidelines that we will be responsible to adhere to at the local level. I do believe, based upon information that I have read, that we will have the ability as a community to make some decisions regarding the process by which our kids come back to school. But I do not know what specific regulations, requirements will come with that ability to make decisions at the local level. But as I've stated before, we anticipate reaching out to our COVID-19 health experts and officials that have participated to date, and then blend them with other interested groups, PTO, through the parent-teacher organizations, the specifically other parent groups that exist within our school district, then clearly our faculty and our staff, to create solutions that will enable us to have a successful 2020-21 school year. I alluded to this very early on tonight at the beginning, that we are stronger together. I absolutely believe that we are stronger together, and we will find a way to help our kids be successful every single day on this school campus or in a hybrid model if it is required. My greatest fear is that we turn red. I sincerely hope that is not necessary, because it is not best for our students. Remote learning was successful for some of our students, which requires us to evaluate a new normal and create potentially a New Albany Learning Academy that provides remote learning access for students if a family would so choose, if it is permissible by law. But the majority of the data illustrates that our students are more successful when they are clearly on our school campus, actively engaged with our teaching faculty on a daily basis, and having access to everything that makes up the New Albany Plain Local School District on a daily basis. So the work has to continue. I do not have all the answers tonight, but I've tried to lay the foundation for all the work that's currently going on amongst the leadership team, our faculty, and our staff. We are actively preparing to be successful for 2020-21, regardless of the rules of engagement. And we can and will do so for our students, our families, and our community at large. I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain comments from the board.
Well, Michael, thank you very much. And I hope that everyone watching, in addition to the board, understands now maybe a little bit more the amount of work that you and the rest of the administration and the folks at the building levels and the teachers are putting into trying to put together the best possible outcomes for our kids as we head into August. There definitely is not much of a summer break this year, and this is really scratching the surface. But one thing I'm curious about, just to give you a quick break to breathe, and then I obviously want others to comment. One of the things that you mentioned as it relates to, even if we're in green, that there's probably going to be some modification of the way that we do school. And while that may, I think, be concerning, or maybe not concerning isn't the right word, but people may wonder what that means. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about what the way I view it is an opportunity, because it seems to me that this, if you're doing some sort of blended learning and students are maybe doing a little bit more independent study or something of that nature, that it really then allows for the classroom time to be, to give our teachers more of an opportunity to provide, whether it's enrichment or supports, or maybe even dive a little bit deeper into something that then allows that classroom time to be less about lecture and really more about engagement and growth and opportunity. Can you talk to that a little bit?
So first and foremost, I agree with everything that you said. I don't know that going back to school as normal, the way it's always been done, is really in anyone's best interest. I think this has forced us as educators to stop, press pause, and ultimately realize we have to build our skills to better meet the needs of kids, because we've discovered that some students thrived differently in an environment that they didn't know that was going to help them thrive in a different way. But at the same time, I would caution you to also understand there are some other students that did not thrive in this environment that need that face-to-face and that direct contact and support from a classroom teacher that would have to look differently if we end up back into some hybrid model. So that was information we also learned about specific students, where it goes back to helping us understand how do we meet their academic and developmental needs independently as individual students. So that was also powerful for us to understand. But to your point, I don't know that normal is putting us back in the way, in a box, that school was done this way and it's the only way it could be done. This has challenged us to think differently and understand that the evolution of education has to change, because it's going to continue to change for kids. I think we've seen that not just in a public school world for pre-K through 12, but look at what's happening in higher education. Look what's happening in the corporate sector related to businesses. I think businesses have discovered there's a new normal of how they're going to do business, because there's some things that they've learned from that process. I think that is our collective responsibility also in education. And back to our statement of purpose, we have to determine what does that look like to help us meet the academic and developmental needs of each kid. So to your point, I don't know that it's just going back to, and we have an incredible school district and we do wonderful things, but we have a spirit of continuous improvement because we can and will continuously improve to better meet the needs of kids. We should have that expectation, and this is forcing us to continue that conversation.
Anybody else have comments or questions?
Michael, I've shared with you the model that Tulane is using and several other colleges.
Correct.
Where we start students earlier in August and cut out breaks and try to have them complete the semester in a compressed way so that they actually take exams and are finished by Thanksgiving. They're actually taking exams at home at the end of that semester, and then they're home for a longer period of time at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Is that something that is a potential option for us to consider, or just with the complexity, it really isn't right now?
So I'm going to tell you, I would just put it in the world of maybe. I've talked to different health officials on our COVID-19 task force that are in favor of that and against that. So it's just interesting as to how that's being interpreted. I will agree that it's dominantly happening within a higher education world, that they're bringing students back no later than mid-August, and their goal is to have them off their campuses by Thanksgiving because of the peak of flu season, which typically is 13 to 15 weeks, dominantly starting by December 1st, which is the logic as to why they're doing it, and having them stay home for an extended break. And to your point, take final exams during the month of December from home remotely. So we've talked about that with the health officials, and I've gotten mixed reviews as to whether or not that's necessary within a pre-K through 12 world based upon the age of the students and the current research or data that supports what's happening with youth related to COVID-19 specifically, and what other safeguards we could put in place. I mean, yes, the flu season is clearly going to present a higher risk, and in my conversations with them, most have gone on record that that's actually when they would expect to see a resurgence possibly. predominantly is because of the flu season, and what that could mean for COVID-19. So I would tell you nothing is off the table, but currently that is not the conversation we're having about starting school 2 weeks earlier. We already start in the middle of August. We're not anticipating changing the start date. We would modify what's happening to adjust around Thanksgiving based upon the data that would be presented if necessary.
Thank you.
Mr. Darrow,
What,
I could tell you
what
want to
make-
talk.
what makes you think I want to talk?
I read your body language.
Well, I'm going to start by saying kids should be in school. They're better off being in school. You did a phenomenal job. You and the staff and our teachers did an excellent job in the emergency at the end of the year, trying to manage what over which you had no control. And so really the staff, everybody did a great job. I am sorry that you and your staff have to spend so much time now working through all of these options, but I'm grateful that you are, because I'm sure that if we have to implement any of these things, we'll be prepared. And that's what we have to do, right, is to be prepared. And for the rest of my commentary, I'm gonna make a disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to give any medical advice, but I can read and I can look at statistics. And the simple fact is that children are not at meaningful risk from this. And we are doing enormous harm to them by making them fearful of other people. When I see kids wearing masks, when I see kids pulling out their eyelashes because they're so freaked out about this, when I see kids doing what they're doing and not being kids, it's horrible. And I just looked at the CDC website a minute ago, and 20 kids have died from COVID, which is horrible. But 97 this year, in a mild flu year, 97 died from the flu. And the World Health Organization just came out and said that asymptomatic transmission is likely not a significant factor. Studies around the world have found that kids don't infect their teachers. And kids should be in school. There's just no reason for kids not to be in school. They should be in school. And so, I'm going to do whatever I can. And I hope parents that want their kids in school do whatever you can. For those parents who are fearful, I understand and I appreciate the fear. And all I can say is most kids should be in school. And the data supports that. And again, I'm going to do whatever I can. And for all those parents and all those teachers who want their kids in school, make your voice heard, because that's where they should be.
Hey, Michael, again, appreciate all the effort and work that's gone in to date to try to get plans in place and contingency plans, depending upon where we end up with, as you said, either guidance or requirements from the state as to how we can operate. One thing, well, and I'm not a doctor either. I actually will be very interested to see how the next couple of weeks play out as things have opened up so much in the past 10 days or so. And in some respects, I'd say it looks like June 8th, 2019 in many parts of our New Albany community right now from a standpoint of interaction. So I really am hopeful that we continue to not see spikes and that we all start feeling better about things here in the near term. But that said, for the fall, should we get well, I guess two things, just maybe to add, and they're probably already in your contingency planning. You mentioned the legislature may pass an option for parents to opt out if they do not want to send their kids to class, in-person class in the fall. If that happens and everybody else is on a green schedule, do we have that contingency where we may have X set of parents who are saying, no, I don't want to send my kids, but the majority do send their kids. And how do we handle that situation? We have a dual remote learning and in-person learning.
So it's a great question. It is currently up conversation within the General Assembly for proposed legislation. So we'll see how it moves through the Senate or the House respectively to basically get to concurrence for our potential legislation. If it becomes an option, then we would have to go back and assess how many students are asking for that option, if it's permissible for us to operate the remote learning school. So it would be a school within the school district. For blended purposes, it's basically hybrid. So we would go into a full-blown red remote for them instead of a green or yellow that would be blended. They would be full-blown red remote 100% of the time. And then we would have to likely talk to the Plain Local Education Association to find out of teacher interest of teaching online full-time versus actually coming to school and doing face-to-face instruction until or if there would be a point in time where yellow would be required. So we would have to reassign staff based upon availability and what grade levels those students were actually in. If it's a secondary student, we have different options related to curriculum, specifically for coursework that could be enacted. But at the elementary level, we would have to understand how many students and what specific grade level we're asking for that option so that we could determine the staffing that's necessary to support that. But it's possible. We would just have to change things in the district.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I know it's a lot of information. And again, it all is subject to change and it will likely be different 5 minutes from now. That is the frustration that we have been living for the last literally 12 weeks because we wait for the 2 o'clock press conference, to be perfectly candid, to find out what's happening because we are not provided that information in advance. We are working with the Buckeye Association of School Administrators, the Ohio High School Athletic Association, the Ohio Association of Secondary School Administrators, the Ohio Association of Elementary School Administrators, the Ohio School Boards, the Ohio Association of School Business Officials, and the Alliance for Equitable Education to kind of, I'm just going to use the word protest, that we're not getting this information and we're not all at the table helping to inform some decisions that need to be made to allow kids to come back to school in August. So that voice, much to what we expressed earlier, is now being heard. And there's some changes that have been enacted by the governor's office to allow different voices to be part of that conversation that are living this every single day in a school district to understand what it really means to kids and why they need to come back to school. So we absolutely, to Mr. Darrow's point, from my perspective, want kids back on this school campus with their teachers and non-teachers, if at all possible, in August. And we need to figure out what that requires so that we can make it happen because they belong here.
Any other questions or comments? With none, that would take us to board action items. But before that, I just want to pause briefly. I was just noticing as I was looking through the agenda here, the one thing that we had mentioned to the community that we were going to add to our board agenda on our virtual meetings was an opportunity for public participation. It's actually not on the agenda, so I'd like to actually add it to our agenda. And so I would request a motion to add an opportunity for public participation to the agenda. We do have several emails that came in today.
So moved.
Mr. Darrow, and a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Newmoff. Ms. Jenkins, could we have a roll call on that, please?
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes. Thank you for that. I'm just going to, there were a few emails that came in today requesting to be included in public participation. Like I'm sure many of you, there were a number of other emails that came in, a lot on the same topic. And I'll just tell you, leading into this, that a lot of the things that I'm going to read here on these emails are things I think are questions that have been answered already by Mr. Sawyers. But in order for us to I guess, follow through on what we said we'd do with the community, I'm going to go ahead and read these. So the first email today came in through David E. Doss, and it says, I have several questions and concerns about tonight's meeting. He attached a photo about the event that happened on Saturday. 3 questions. Question 1, this photo appears to be on school grounds, but why can the board not meet in an open forum to discuss parental concerns about unauthorized surveillance of our children? I believe that's been answered. Question 2, why would the board consider running a pilot surveillance program? This is a violation of their freedoms and HIPAA laws. Question 3, with alternative options available to the community, why is the board not just allowing satellite teaching for people who are afraid? Homeschooling is an available option as well. However, we expect our children to learn and flourish with a system that doesn't make decisions based off fear alone. NAPLS is doing more harm than good at this point, and we expect more from our school board. Studies have proven that kids thrive with human-to-human interactions. What are you going to do? Wendy Flowers. Thank you to Superintendent Sawyers for posting an update on Facebook about the article on Wired. If he and the board could provide the following: updates on the pilot. Has it started? What would be a successful pilot? How would a decision be made to use this technology? Would parents be involved in the decision-making process? How would this be paid for? Some other questions. Any updates on the plan for students returning this fall? Is there a plan for better online learning if a second wave of COVID hits during the school year? There was a budget cut from the state on funding. How is NAPLS impacted? And where can parents find the budget sheet for sports? How much comes from pay to play? And how do those funds get dispersed? That was from Wendy Flowers. Chad Palmer, as a concerned parent of students in the NAPLS school district and taxpayer, I respectfully submit the following questions for the board's consideration at the board meeting this evening. I imagine it's no surprise, but by questions related to the recent article published by Wired magazine. According to a post from June 7th, 2020 on the Facebook page of NAPLS superintendent, the school district was approached by a parent, presumably Larry Fruth based on other posts, long before the COVID-19 pandemic on the topic of student safety and security. Mr. Fruth indicates he served as a liaison between the school district and a technology company that provides some type of surveillance service according to its website. Was there a meeting, discussion, or some other type of contact between the school district and said technology company, with or without Mr. Fruth's involvement, at the time, i.e. before COVID-19? And if so, what was the nature of such meeting, discussion, or contact? In other words, why would the school district engage in a discussion with any company that is looking to electronically track students, particularly before the onset of COVID-19? If for safety reasons, how would such technology improve the safety of students? And how did the school district consider the fact that location data could fall into the wrong hands? I don't discount the importance of the safety of students and applaud the efforts of the board and NAPLS leadership to continuously challenge whether safety can be improved. But in my opinion, this is going much too far. Further, what evidence is the school district citing that would necessitate such technology as a result of COVID-19? There are many conflicting reports in the media, and the CDC's own website seems to indicate the impact of COVID-19 is far less severe than the original projections reported by many media outlets. Finally, what is the nature of the relationship between the school district, Mr. Fruth, and Volan Technology Incorporated, and any other entities involved or referenced in the article from Wired magazine? And then lastly, from Frank, this is Keeley Weaver, sorry. Keeley Weaver. Even though I feel the risk of COVID for our youth is low, I would like to present some options to spread the students so that they can go back to school full-time this fall. Eliminate pre-K and go back to half-day kindergarten to allow for more distancing. Contract out to use classroom and lecture space at the McCoy Center, Height Center, Church of the Resurrection Ministry Building, and the library during school hours. Additional options, if needed, are at the church across the street from the primary school building and Noah's Event Center. We could follow OSU and end face-to-face from Thanksgiving until January. We could also start school a week or two earlier this fall. And on buses, you should do a survey to see if parents want to opt out of busing, so you can see what numbers would still require busing where it is offered. That's the public participation for this evening. And normally we do not, public participation is an opportunity for people to make their voice heard. It's not necessarily an opportunity for conversation, but I do believe majority of those questions either were probably already answered by Mr. Sawyers. As it relates to the finance questions, I'm sure that if they have further information that they need, they could ask Ms. Jenkins.
President McClelland, I've actually already responded to those.
Oh, I think I may have, I thought that was a David. It was a David E. That was a lady. And so I apologize profusely. I just saw David and I just went with it. So fortunately for the name John, it's pretty easy. You know, it's a guy. So I apologize. So that takes us to board action items. So I request a motion on board items A through C before we have conversation.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Mr. Darrow, Ms. Kalinowski, Mr. Sawyers.
President McClellan, members of the Board of Education, the board action items this evening are a result of the successful negotiations related to the OPSI Local 303, specifically the non-teaching faculty within our school district. This is their updated, for letter A, their updated printed version of the contract. Last board meeting, you approved the memorandum of understanding. So this actually effectuates the full agreement. Now that we had the memorandum of understanding approved to settle a one-year contract extension with the zero-based increase for the 2020-21 school year specifically. All other terms and conditions of employment remain the same. The financial remuneration that's being received is an action item within the contract that they would be awarded 83.3333% of the performance stipend for eligibility for the academic achievement stipend based upon the 2019-20 school year, with the change in the CIP goal number 1 that's actually outlined in the third action item within this section, to change the goal to account for the fact that there was no way to meet the goal. It was not achievable because of the elimination of state testing within the state of Ohio. So we revised the goal based upon successful completion of remote learning requirements by specific job classification and or professional development activities that were specifically assigned within each job classification itself. Letter B, since our last Board of Education meeting, we had reached a tentative agreement for a new one-year contract with the Plain Local Education Association. So as alluded to by Mr. Newmoff in his commentary previously, we have been actively negotiating with the associations because their contracts both expired June 30th. I'm happy to report that we also achieved a successful outcome with our teaching staff. They too have accepted a one-year contract, a new one-year contract, applicable from July 1st through June 30th, 2021. The terms and conditions dominantly stay the same. We have effectuated language changes based upon housekeeping, grammatical issues, or changes that specifically happen through changes in Ohio Revised Code, or mutually agreeable sections based upon practice within the school district. So substantively, the majority of the language is holistically the same. For financial purposes, we did agree to the same 83.333% of the academic achievement stipend based upon the change in goal number 1. So it would effectuate a payment of $1,250 for plea, and I didn't say it, but it was $625 for OPSI. So those are the financial outcomes that would be awarded to each of those respective bargaining units. The last action item in this section is the revision of continuous improvement plan goal number 1 for public record purposes that we had previously adopted a goal for ranking purposes based upon outcomes of student achievement that is not achievable because of the elimination of the requirements related to COVID-19 within the state. So this actually provides the record for board adoption that we are modifying that goal for 2019-20 to make it achievable so that we can effectuate the terms and conditions agreed upon within the collective bargaining unit agreements. Are there any questions I can answer? Any comments related to our successful negotiations the board would like to share?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I guess I'll just start with comments. Just again, so thankful for all the work that's been done by everyone to handle the situation that we never would have thought would have been laid in our laps, and our teachers were tremendous in the way that they responded to it, as well as the administration and everyone else. And this is still a very difficult time. While we're hopefully starting to see things starting to move in the right direction, we also have to recognize that there are still a lot of people in this community who have suffered significantly financially, as well as the district. We talked on our previous meeting about the way the budget has been hit, and the reductions that we're seeing from the state. And so to have a good partner in this process, with OPSI and now also PLE, agreeing to do a 1-year contract to with really nothing added to their base pay. It's, I think, a recognition of where we all are, and we appreciate their willingness to go along with us in this process, and to continue to focus on putting the students first and going through all the things that we know are going to be happening this summer that you've talked about here, Mr. Sawyers, as related to preparing for the fall, and still a lot of uncertainty about what that's going to look like. And the reality that no matter what it looks like, the world is going to be different, and teaching is going to be different, and the recognition that the way that they do their jobs is going to be different. And so just really appreciate their willingness to be part of the team, and we're glad to have them on the team, and we look forward to an incredible new year as we head into the 2020-21 school year, and that we're doing it all hand in hand is really exciting, and I'm happy for it.
So I share John's comments. I appreciate the work of the administration in working through these contracts. I appreciate the understanding and acceptance by our associations of the financial hardships that exist within our community and throughout the state. With 1.25 million Ohioans unemployed, it's a big deal, and a lot of those people are right here in New Albany. And being part of the community means being part of the community. We share when things are good, and we share when things aren't good. And the payment of the performance bonus was a challenging component, but as we worked through it, we recognized that we were on track based on our internal testing for the achievement of our student achievement, our academic goals. And when we were not able to complete that, and we were able to move forward with a complete change in how education was delivered, and do so about as successfully as I think could have been done on the fly, and adapt our processes, we felt that some good faith payment of that bonus was warranted. And we will be right back at it with a revised goal for next year. That will be a hard, challenging, objective goal, and we look forward to all of our staff members, all of our certified and classified staff, and all of our administration participating in the achievement of that goal, whatever it turns out to be. But we're going to charge forward, and appreciate the work of everybody to make it happen.
I'll just say a quick thank you. Won't belabor the point, but appreciate our associations working with the community and continue to keep our students first in this process. And again, thank you, and look forward to a great year ahead. And we'll be back at it a year from now. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a big thank you. I teared up a little bit when I saw the results of the vote. I feel like we're all in this together, and the vote really demonstrates that, and just so appreciative of the sacrifice that you're making with us, and the understanding of the hardship facing the community and the district. And I think we're all looking forward to brighter days ahead, but just want to share that you know, this is so meaningful and so appreciative.
Yep, and I'll just echo what everybody said. Obviously, really appreciate the partnership. When times are tough, it's amazing to see, OPSI, PLE, and our administration all come together. It's easy when, it's smooth sailing, right? And, the teams over the last few years, maybe it's been smooth sailing, but, we were able to deliver amazing results throughout the district. And now when it gets a little tough, it's great to see that everyone is still willing to team up for one goal. I'm just very thankful and appreciative.
So without any further comments, I will request a roll call, please.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes. That brings us to superintendent's items, A and B. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Second.
second by Mr. Bush. Mr. Sawyers?
Thank you, President McClellan. Members of the Board of Education, number 5, letter A, are the personnel action items for this evening. Standard employee actions, accepting resignations from the school district, as well as approving specific stipends for the work that we've outlined for the summer so far. There may be a few more things that appear at the next agenda that we're still finalizing, but the majority of the work that we anticipate for curriculum related and or professional development activities are outlined on the agenda for approval for the summer, with a few exceptions that we are still working through. Classified staff resignations, as well as athletic supplementals and contracts for new employees within the school district. Letter B this evening for general business is enrollment of employee children pursuant to the terms and conditions of the negotiated agreements for eligibility, student teaching agreements within the school district, provided that we're back in school and we're able to accept future teachers to our profession to go through their student teaching process necessary with the respective institution of higher education. We have an approval this evening for a contract with Meta that goes through our process for consortium-based agreements, specifically for the approval of the firewall. That's what this is, with all that legalese that's outlined, but it's basically the firewall purchased within the school district for participation. And then the last item is unusual. It's not something that comes all the time that we see readily on a board agenda. So I just want to spend a minute and talk about it. We own the land that the amphitheater is clearly being built upon, as all of you know, and it sits on multiple parcels based upon public record and utility agreements. So as they've worked through the process necessary to actually be able to finalize their plans for utilities related specifically to the construction of the amphitheater, for which we executed a lease agreement for the New Albany Community Foundation and the City of New Albany. There's been a request from the utility companies specifically to adjoin the parcels to allow for the water line. So all of those individual parcels are being combined back into a parcel to then account for the utilities that would be assigned specifically to the amphitheater. So the attachments that are part of the board agenda this evening are the documents that are necessary from the attorneys to allow that process to happen so that the amphitheater can have utilities, specifically water.
Any questions on that? If none, I will request a roll call.
Ms. Kalinowski,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes, that brings us to a motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Mr. Darrow, second.
Second.
Mr. Newmoff, roll call, please.
Vice President Darrow,
Yes.
Mr. Newmoff,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Kalinowski,
Yes.
President McClelland.
Yes, we are adjourned. Our next meeting will be a regular meeting, Monday, June the 22nd, 6 o'clock. Thank you.
Hopefully in person.
Hopefully so.